Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Three things we want to talk about today. Quantum, the news from Anthropic about the arrival of the machine economy. I think it's the LLM industry growing up and realizing that they have to work on a commercial base. They cannot continue to be subsidized by vast amounts of VC funding. And the third one was coming back to Anthropic again, Mythos. So the illusion that the Internet of Data is a secure place for anybody to do anything with sensitive data, never mind economic value, should now be fully exploded and exposed, or exposed and exploded, whichever way around you want to go. But let's start with quantum. A lot of fuss about quantum over the last couple of weeks with the news from Google. Our resident quantum expert, Ulf Wiger, who wrote the paper that we published, well, yeah, relative term, but yeah, you are the expert within the team, or one of them, and you wrote the paper that we put up on the qpq.swiss website and gajumaru.io site about what we've done with quantum, what the issues really are, how we've approached it. And actually, I thought it was one of the most mature, grown-up writings on this, because so much of what we've seen around it has been sensationalist, and I think is not about quantum at all. It's about driving an agenda. However, we'll come to that. Ulf, do you want to give the audience a précis of what it was that you had to say in that article and what we've done to address the quantum issue?
Yeah, so in that article, we quoted ourselves from a while back when we were saying that we believe that quantum computers capable of cracking elliptic curve cryptography, the one used in most blockchains, is at least decades away if it will ever materialize. Having said that, we talked about how our architecture is actually well prepared for implementing alternative signing methods. So we have already demonstrated that we will support quantum resistant accounts by mainnet launch. I have been working on supporting them more natively so that we get even more efficiency doing it. But so now a couple of some news dropped where there have been some theoretical optimizations in how you could solve or implement Shor's algorithm, which is the trick to cracking crypto keys or finding really large prime numbers, and with much fewer qubits than was previously thought. So that brought the solution an order of magnitude or so closer. And another evolution is that using so-called neutral atoms, the chances of being able to actually run tens of thousands of qubits in a realistic machine have increased. So I think in the very most optimistic predictions, more or less, in the mid-2030s, you might see quantum computers that could possibly attack, say, a single blockchain key pair in running in a few days, like, or maybe 10 days, running at full bore. Now, that wouldn't be sensible to do unless that account has at least like $100,000 worth of crypto in it or more, probably a lot more, and also wouldn't really be sensible unless there weren't any other attractive business cases for that kind of quantum computer. But it turns out there are interesting computing business cases like protein folding simulations and all kinds of stuff. that would be really, really interesting to run on those machines. So we think that our analysis holds up really well. You would keep most of your funds, if you even have funds of that size. You could have one or a couple of safe accounts that are protected by quantum resistant signatures. And then you can keep using elliptic curve crypto for the lower value accounts. And this has been best practice, apart from the quantum side, anyway. If you have lots of crypto, you spread it out over several accounts. You have some accounts with keys that never touch the internet that you don't have in your mobile wallet, just to minimize the risk that you will lose those keys and therefore your money. And then you have some accounts that have a limited amount of money in them that you use for your daily work. And if you have integrated that way of structuring your assets, then you can keep doing that. You're going to be fine. And you can definitely do it on Gajumaru because we have the support for that. So no worries on our end. And I guess it will be good for humanity if they manage to build those machines. Maybe ideally machines that aren't really economical for cracking crypto, but really good for a lot of other things. Now, and it turns out that most of the researchers who are working really hard on this, they aim at Shor's algorithm mostly because that's like a poster example, not because they are just longing to break security everywhere. But it's an easy target, or it's a hard target, but well defined to aim for. And it's sexy and it can get them funding. So we're still fine. We're not panicking on our end.
I mean,
I guess that's my message.
There are multiple layers of defense to quantum within our planning, within the work that you've done, within the implementations. I mean, the point was when we posted this a couple of months back, forgive me, that we're quantum secure at this point in time, because I had come back from Davos and said to you guys, look, the things that are on everybody's lips are AI, quantum, and most of it is woefully ill-informed. It's all panic, and you have to look at those panic levers and ask, why are people having panicked conversations? Why aren't they having rational conversations like we have about this, saying, well, there is this issue here and there is that one over there, and this is what looks like it's going to play out toward. As it stands, the Gajumaru is quantum secure. The choices that people will make as to how secure their operations on it are theirs. We don't control it, we don't govern it, we don't dictate those terms. However, the more complex you make the security levers in that, the more expensive it will be to run a transaction, to send a message, because you've elected to put frictions in place that are your choice, therefore you pay for them. I appreciate in the era of everything being bundled from our music to our software choices, that the idea that you pay for utility where you find it is somewhat foreign to many people. But ultimately, I know Web3 is a dirty word in our team, but what Web 2 was always about was that aggregation. It was about the internet of data. It was about where you found the information. And ultimately, it was all free because you were the value. Your data was the value. The idea of the internet the Web3 idea was essentially that you would find utility and pay for it as you used it. Ultimately, if you strip away all of the nonsense that appeared in every ICO and white paper and tokenomics, that's what it basically boiled down to if they were trying to offer anything of any actual utility and not just a number go up scheme. this is the utility we offer, this is how people will pay for it. And that really has still not been answered at all, which we'll come to in a second with the Anthropic email from last Friday. Good Friday, a great Friday for us as it happens. In fact, I feel a bit like Donald Trump saying that it was good, then it was great. But anyway, the whole thing around those choices are the things that we're building out at the moment. Craig, you and Ulf were talking about this morning.
Oh, well, yeah, the problem that people have faced with well, just streaming media, for example, we had previously had the problem where the recording industry, broadly speaking, had mistaken medium for message, and the message being the thing that you want to watch this movie, but the movie's a big number, essentially, and they would mistake the medium, the DVD that you get it on, as the movie experience. And so you'd pay for the DVD, but then you can watch the movie as many times as you want. They got rid of that and they went to this subscription streaming model. And then everybody wanted their own streaming platform. So now there's dozens of streaming platforms. Depending on what you want, things disappear, they come up, they go down, you've paid for it, but you can't get it anymore. This has kind of become a disaster for people. So we went from the DVD control regime being so oppressive that people were pirating movies back to early streaming was so convenient that people stopped piracy. Now they're going back to piracy because the streaming platforms are bundling everything. It's a mess.
Let's come back to that in a second, because
okay,
what you're touching on there is the unbundling piece. And I know I kind of set that up, but actually I want to stick to the quantum piece, because the conversation you and Ulf had this morning was around what
the
other
layers.
Choices. Yeah. Creating those layers around the quantum solution set. And what I was saying is, look, people are going to have to start taking responsibility for the choices they make. The
That's right.
informed choice that works for your specific requirements is what we're going to try and make sure there is a variety of for people to pick from. I just would like you to go through some of the things that you were talking about this morning that we are going to implement.
Sure. Oh yeah, sure. So currently we have, the main account form is the elliptic curve keys that we've all seen. It's the AK _ blah 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 IDs. We also have generalized accounts, the GAs, which we can already put a quantum secure authorization scheme behind if we want. I think, I don't know, the current jazz over quantum computing gives us an excuse to kind of play in an area that is actually really interesting and kind of nerdy fun, and that is to have tiered account categories. So the current AK accounts remain as they are. We can add A1 accounts, A2 accounts, A3 accounts, and these become sort of difficulty layers. An A1 account being, this is the current conception right now. I have to finish writing this up and run it through review with Dimitar and Ulf, and we'll see how that changes when subjected to scrutiny. But the basic idea is having like an A1 account would be an elliptic curve key, but the reference for it is the ID for it is not the public key. It's a hash of the public key, kind of like on Bitcoin. So you can't figure out what the public key is, so you can't attack it to start with. So if you send money to that account, there's no public key record yet until some activity occurs on that account. So there's nothing to attack yet. So that's one layer of additional security added to the existing scheme. The place where you encounter some friction with that is elliptic curve key cryptography has some amazingly good properties for things like messaging and creating secure message channels and encrypting a message to somebody who you haven't even talked to yet. You know their public key, so you can do an encrypted message to that specific person. There's a lot of really nice properties to ECC. So if you can't see the public key, you don't have access to some of those more advanced features, which is inconvenient, but it's fine. For this case of protecting an account a little bit more securely. The next level, an A2 account, would be a DSA, an MLDSA key, which is a cryptographically strong signature mechanism But that mechanism requires keys that are very large compared to ECC keys. You're talking thousands of bits instead of, hundreds. And the signatures
about
are
four
also
key,
huge.
4 kilobytes for the medium strength MLDSA.
Right.
Well, the private key, let's see, the signature size is about 3K
Yes.
for MLDSA 65. And the public keys, because you have to store them too on the chain, they're about 2K. So
Nice.
there are reasons why you wouldn't want to just go to town and use these accounts for everything today, because it will bloat things and it will be slower. And and the thing about using temporary accounts, I guess that is the way to stay safe on Bitcoin right now, where you don't reveal the public key until you actually want to sign something. So essentially the account is anonymous until you push a transaction to the mempool where you actually want to sign things. And then you have a window where everything is out in the open, not your private key, but essentially it's crackable.
But
if you have the hardware for it.
This is the thing that and forgive me cutting in on you as well, Craig. We'll come back to it. This is the thing that has me sort of laughing a little bit, but in a dark way, at what's going on around this, because the assumption that they're going to build a quantum computer and the first thing it's going to do is wake up in the morning going, today, gentlemen, I'm going to hack everybody's Bitcoin account.
Yeah.
And it's just insane. Like, as you point out, unless an account does something on chain, it has no existence. There's nothing to point at. It doesn't exist yet as far as the chain is concerned. That's one. But the more fundamental part is you have to aim a quantum computer at a specific thing. And even if you were to take the assumption that it will become exceedingly cheap to run a quantum computer 50, 60, 100 years from now, it's still not going to be the case that it just gets up and automatically says, oh, I'm going to go and hack everything I can touch. No, that's not how they work. And I think a lot of the panic, and I've touched on this before, is agenda driven. It's not about, is Bitcoin insecure? Yeah, it is. It's always been insecure. The quantum aspect doesn't necessarily change this. I mean, ultimately, the most insecure thing in the security chain is the human being. Where do you leave we've already had some of the people who are miners, some of the earliest miners who have lost their mnemonic. And with it has gone a big chunk of Gajus. Whatever you want to do with any system, the human being element cannot be taken away as ceasing to be the risk vector. What I think I'm seeing in terms of certainly on X and a little bit on LinkedIn, and I've even taken to asking which one of the wannabe saviors is funding you to certain shrills, because you've got a few of them out there. Salo's talking about how he's going to save Bitcoin from quantum, and he has so many devs working on a quantum security algorithm. You've got Adam Beck, who has a long track record of wanting to be the savior. No doubt we'll see Craig Wright rear his wonderfully litigious head around some of this stuff as well. All these things are coming. And these people are all putting their hand up saying, oh, I'll save Bitcoin. And it's not, I think it's only going to be a matter of time before Larry Fink adds to his previous comment about, well, Bitcoin can be forked with, we're going to fork it and we'll have all the money in the world to do it with. The thing that's, I think, really happening is they're creating this panic to drive people into a savior state that introduces governance. And the moment you have that governance, it's gone. Bitcoin is finished. The moment you have governance, it's finished, except for to the number go up community who make up most of the Bitcoin community. For those people, it's just another means of keeping the number go up fantasy running. These are the same people who think that it's not an open Ponzi scheme, who really hate it when I say things like, have you thought about what happens when the subsidy of the market price is absent and you now must rely upon transaction fees in order to incentivize miners? Oh, that's 140 years away. Yeah, but have you ever heard of a time value of money calculation? Because if the future value is this and the present value is this, that disconnect becomes a risk.
Well,
But
it
again,
isn't though. I mean, we're already at the point where the cost of mining Bitcoin is, well, roughly equal to the price of Bitcoin, as it happens.
that's not
And
true. That's not true. Um,
well,
the research I
I
did
think it
last
may be
week,
lower now.
87,000 is the average price before the war in Iran broke out. Iran had extremely cheap hash rate. So I think that's probably gone up quite substantially over the course of the war, especially with rising fuel prices. But as of the end of February, when I could get the data to run the analysis, the average cost of mining Bitcoin in the previous 3 months had averaged at $87,000. The average price of Bitcoin in the same period was $70,000. And this is why you have companies like Mars writing down, I can't remember how many billions it was, of Bitcoin mining operations.
And the next halving isn't 40 years away. It's coming pretty soon. I haven't inked it into my calendar because I don't I don't
No,
really
but look,
invest in Bitcoin.
it's very entertaining watching the halving cycle, because the halving cycle essentially is get to the halving, keep everybody saying, oh, it's not going to happen this time, the price isn't going to go up enough, it's the whole thing is going to collapse, and so anybody who gets fearful of where Bitcoin is going to go and starts applying some logic and reason and allows that logic and reason to overwhelm the illogical FOMO, starts to sell. And then the narrative switches because the whales have refilled their boots and now they need the price to go back up again and create all that FOMO that lets them do the exit just after the halving. Maybe about a year after that, you'll see the price collapse again. This is a repeat process that they've been doing since the beginning. But look, putting aside the whole thing of how Bitcoin pricing is manipulated, mining operations are no longer sustainable, the fundamental thing that people have been pushing at in the last week has been Google can hack Google's quantum computer can hack a transaction in 9 minutes, and Bitcoin takes 10. So, yeah, but these are the things that are going on, and this is the narrative that's being pushed. There's a lot of panic coming from all the shrills around this. I think that panic is manufactured. I think, like everything else in the Bitcoin system, like, for example, what I just talked about, how they talk down Bitcoin for a sustained period to shake everybody out, refill their boots, and then talk it back up again right in time for the next halving. All of these things, I think, are being paid for. I think they're being paid for by very wealthy people who have put their hands up saying, I can save Bitcoin. I can save Bitcoin from this terrible quantum threat. Just give me the keys to the kingdom. And one of the things that we've always talked about is that there can be no key. That, this is the message of Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. It's not that, well, a hobbit is such a good-natured person that they can hold the ring. No, nobody can hold the ring. Nobody can be entrusted with that much power. But that's what they all want. And that's what the system is built around. The whole corporatist system is about creating control and then extracting rent from that control. It is not about adding value and the differential between the value add and the price being your profit margin.
We should call this cabal of people the Nazgul, because they're these clingy race that want to run everything, but their own influence has corrupted themselves first and foremost.
That's pretty much what they are. In fact, that is what they will be from this day forth, the Nazgul.
The Nazgul. There's like 9 of them, and they're all creeps.
Yeah.
Still, though,
and more
there is
than
some
one of
good
them has
news
had
for
direct
people
connections with Jeffrey Epstein too, by the way.
Oh, that's great.
So we can call him Sauron. Anyway,
Oh
sorry,
boy.
So,
our
so
child has
there
just
is
got
good
in the way
news
of
for
you making an
people
adult
who
comment.
have, people who have a lot of Bitcoin could actually move to wrapped Bitcoin on a different chain. And for Bitcoin in particular, it wouldn't be that terrible because practically all of the traffic around Bitcoin is off chain already.
Yeah, Bitcoin doesn't
Yeah.
run Bitcoin anymore, so we should make an associate chain, GBTC, that's a native, have a
Well,
native Bitcoin as an alt currency,
not we should, we will.
because we can do that.
Yeah, no, we
Mm.
look, I've been talking to Bitcoin whales who are, I think, more grounded, more practical about this. And the conversation arc was essentially, so how do you, they were saying, oh, Bitcoin is money. And I said, okay, well, look, I respect that because that's actually where it began. It began as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So when I hear someone say that and not the store of value narrative, which is not supported by the Satoshi white paper in any way, shape, or form, and I appreciate that they think that I'm a Nazi for referring to the white paper that they hold as being a sacred document, unless it disagrees with them. But, excuse me, the conversation I've had with those people is, okay, so how do you buy a coffee with it? How do you buy a pair of shoes with it? How do I buy a plane ticket with it? I'm standing in the terminal airport. I need to get from Chicago to St. Louis. It's an emergency. I can't wait an hour to get on the flight. I can't. I can barely wait the 10 minutes. How do I transact? Oh, Lightning. Well, I'm sorry. No, Lightning doesn't work. 23% of the time. And I remember Peter Harpending did a really good article. It's on Gajumaru.io and I think qpq.swiss about exactly this, that Lightning doesn't just fail at $100. It gets more and more failures the further up the value chain you go.
Yeah.
So when you get to an airline ticket last minute,
It's not going through.
It's not going through. Full stop.
There's no way.
And all the demos with Lightning are done for micropayments for a good reason. The reality is it's a massively intermediated system. The Gini index is 0.97. I say all these things. I say, look, one is absolute monopoly. That's how bad Lightning is. And then I said, look, there is an alternative. But if I were you, I wouldn't like it. But if I were you, I wouldn't be holding on to Bitcoin either. So my opinion is moot and irrelevant to this conversation. If I wanted to hold Bitcoin, I would hold it as a Gaju wrapped Bitcoin, which does mean that you have an intermediated provider who wraps the Bitcoin. But the flip side is, if that intermediate provider is actually a regulated entity, you haven't lost anything, because Lightning was already I think is it wallet of Satoshi, and it's a custodial wallet. Almost the entirety of Lightning is custodial. The whole mechanism of it is custodial. So the difference is that you've moved from custodial with no oversight to custodial with regulatory oversight. It's somewhat less palatable because Lightning are very, like all of the layer twos, are completely dishonest about how they actually operate. And that we've touched on a lot in the unwhite paper. So just recapping
you could definitely have an unregulated AC on Gajumaru where you could wrap things in the Wild West, essentially. But why would you want to? Certainly, if you're in the EU, there is a lot of talk now about the MiCA getting more serious, and that it will be a real bloodbath for the unregulated stablecoins.
I need to come up with a good way to convey to, like, talking with the space people, the structure of the Gajumaru is an immediate understanding and immediate good solve for them, because they understand when I explained that we can tune for these huge latencies in cislunar space, that they get it, because they've thought about that exact problem already. But most people haven't considered exactly, they've thought only about how to dodge regulation, not how to adapt to it. And the structure that the Gajumaru has, that gives it this massive flexibility to adapt to different regulatory schemes. I need to come up with a good way to convey that to people in a simple way, because it's structural. It's not a thing you can just add to some other chain or just make a layer 2 that does whatever. It's a really hard problem. It's a really sticky problem. And our architecture lets us flex around that. It turned out, what was obviously the right answer for reducing complexity in the system turned out to be just like the killer feature for kind of all these cases, because adaptability, nobody, I think, predicted early on in blockchain that this adaptability is the killer feature. You have to be adaptable in these surprising ways. And I mean, lucky us, we've got the only one that can do it, but it's just like that feature can't be stressed enough, how important it is that we can flex different parts of the system, being a chain of chains that can do this.
Well, I mean, lucky us, we can also more or less write a book about the joys of being crypto adjacent, which is what we've had to be for.
We've learned the hard way how important this is. It's actually been a crappy set of lessons.
But
So
you know something. So I mean, look, putting a cap on the quantum point, the recap to that is, number one, I think a lot of what's going on in this is panic talk. It's not rational talk. I think what Ulf put out a little while ago, back in January, is what an adult would have to say about this. A well-informed adult would have to say about this, and I would direct everybody to read it. Not only because it points out that the Gajumaru is quantum secure and will become stronger and stronger in that regard, with clear planning for how it might adapt further in future without needing any governance.
And how that's left up to the user to decide what level of security, increased security, correlates with increased friction. So it's up to them how to do this, but that winds up in the mempool competition space with an appropriate pricing without us having to do anything. That's another magical feature that's going to emerge as we go. Thank goodness.
Now, Craig, I think that might actually qualify as hate speech. That sounded very like Milton Friedman.
Oh, dear me. It's one of my favorite people ever. But yeah, that dude and Thomas Sowell are amazing.
Yeah, no, but his speech on the miracle of a pencil
Yes.
is the one that I always point people at. And that's exactly what this is. It's like, okay, so, and I'm going to come to this now in a second. Basically, the reason I love the machine economy, despite everything that we're trying to do about being the restoration of human sovereignty, is because actually machines are going to be complete capitalists. They are not going to care one iota about what false barriers you create to create these ivory towers in which there is no competition. The corporatists create control and then extract value from that control, or sorry, extract rent from that control, is going to die. The machines just aren't going to put up with it. And what you've just touched on is exactly what machines will do. They will look at something and say, well, the cost, the risk is X, the cost is Y, the decision therefore is Z. And the market will give them the price points and data they need to make that informed decision. For example, you've got the mempool competition. What is it going to cost to run this transaction in this time frame with this level of friction for security? Answer, right there, it's in front of you. Make your decision. Do you want to go faster or do you want to go more secure? The whole point is to restore choice to the user, whether that user is an agentic AI at the behest of that user or that user is an individual clicking a button. And that kind of segues us very nicely to this whole point around what happened on Good Friday, Great Friday, as I will begin to call it. So essentially, Anthropic sent out an email on the 4th of April ending the flat rate compute for OpenClaw. For those who don't know, OpenClaw is a set of tools that you can download and install on your own machine that you then plug a large language model into. Claude is the one that is most often used, but you can plug in Grok, I believe, and you can definitely plug in ChatGPT and have it do all manner of things for you, almost, well, you can actually install it in such a way that there are no stops to what it does.
It can just automatically mess your life right up.
It can.
Yeah, delete all your emails, which happened to one of the security experts at Meta.
But this is the cost of, what was it they used to say about innovation was about running fast and breaking things. So while I have some sympathy for those who thought that it was a secure system and installed it on their home computer with access to everything in their home files, it's limited. So yeah, OpenClaw essentially uses a large language model to do all this work. And in doing so, it is polling the large language model tool set thousands of times a day. This is not what these tool sets were designed for. And this goes back to what you were touching on, Craig, this whole thing with bundling. So you can get a subscription to ChatGPT for $20 a month. You can do the same with Claude. I think Grok is about $180 a year, including X Premium, to get the top end version of Grok. These things are all, I think, massively subsidized by the venture capital industry. There's a little bit of a kidology going on with the OpenClaw people talking about how awful it is that Anthropic have done this, because actually ChatGPT, where the founder of OpenClaw now works, haven't done this yet. But ChatGPT got $300 billion of compute subsidization from Oracle in exchange for equity. So it's just delaying.
These numbers hurt to hear.
They're insane. But in an era when money is meaningless because it's been destroyed.
Only if you're
as a
doing dumb
concept.
things.
Yeah,
if you're doing stupid stuff, it's free.
For sure. And I personally think that this is, if I were looking at this as an LLM AI analyst, I would say this is great news. This is the industry finally beginning to come of age and finding its feet and discovering that it needs to be commercial. Actual compute is not cheap. It's expensive. And in fact, the demand to grow it, we've talked about this a few times, the number of data centers that are in theory doing something that aren't, so much fraud, so much going on in this sector. And ultimately, the subsidization model doesn't work when people actually use it properly. It's the same as if everybody uses gym membership was the original version of this. You can fit 100 people into your gym, you sell 10,000 memberships. The gamble is that at no time will more than 100 people want to use it at the same time. Netflix is more bundling. You touched on this, Craig, so I'll pass that back to you to continue.
Well, the gym membership one's really telling, because a lot of the gym membership industry depends on a few things, one of which is, yes, not everyone's going to show up at the same time. Two, most people will never show up. That's your favorite customer because they produce no wear and tear on your system, and you make it very difficult to get out of the contract. And you also provide the emotional support that every New Year's and every birthday, the guy says, my resolution is to go to the gym. So he shows up like once. And he's like, you know what? That kind of sucked. I'm not going back. So, but he keeps the gym membership because he wants to be a person who has a gym membership. That's actually the sales model. The regulars who do show up every day, the guy that trains 4 days a week, you hate that guy, especially if he uses machines, because you got to like have the cable dude come out and replace stuff, and they got to mop up, and it's overhead.
It's much more entertaining than that. LA Fitness in London, when I was working in London and I was playing.
I'm sorry, LA Fitness in London. That's
yeah. I know. But they were
Okay.
directly underneath, just to the side of the office that I was working in. At the time, I was playing for London Welsh, and I was still a fairly big unit, and I was still squatting outrageous amounts, and they banned me from their gym and released me from their membership because I was using all of their free weights on the bar.
The plates.
Yeah, all the plates in order to do just my squat session. And yeah, sorry, but it just is.
No,
you're right. The point is, anybody who's a real gym user, and I was back then, you are not welcome in any way, shape, or form.
That's Peter and I had made an observation before about and his phrasing for this is really good. He the kind of gyms that I like to go to are the places where the football team goes, rugby team goes, the baseball team shows up and all that. And they've got a certain smell to them that you're like, someone uses this gym, first off.
Yeah, and they all
there's
have
a
that
certain
smell.
there's a certain type of person that really hates that smell, and then there's other people that go, "Oh, this is where I want to. This is my place. I get it." And that's the whiskey gym is got that, and then you got the wine gyms, and that's the place that has lots of floor space for yoga, and there's people that talk about a lot of aspirational things more than they actually do any work, and they call them weights because they wait on you. That kind of place, and those people are the cash cow. So the whiskey gyms are very like work focused, and half the equipment in the gym belongs to somebody who goes to that gym, and that's where they're able to keep their stuff, and everybody else and it's all like free weights, right? That so whiskey gyms versus wine gyms is kind of this distinction that we've come to appreciate, and I guess that extends to crypto projects too. I just saw for the first time, you know, this nauseating but funny thing called pump.fun. They're just minting money right now, and it's a big joke. And they literally just say, "This is to pump your meme coin," and it has create a meme coin on the thing. And I'm like, wow. And it's all bots. There's no people. It's just bots trying to create volume to make it look like a meme coin has volume. It's sort of like the nexus. I don't know. It's sort of the distillation of all the nonsense that happens on Solana is right there.
Sort of like a Rico case, maybe.
Well, if
No,
yeah,
no, it is. You guys don't get time to read all the stuff that I put out, but one of the things I've been talking about, and it's in the unwhite paper where I talk about layer 2s, and it's going to be so much fun when I get to do the case study on Solana, the most centralized, decentralized chain of them all, and
but it's fast.
Oh, it actually isn't. No, it isn't. That is another thing.
Well,
but let's come to Andreas Anderson and A16Z in just a second, please. But no, the Pump Fun and the Solana foundations and all the pieces around it are all now in court in New York. They've gone through the first hearings, and this is now real and serious. Forget the name of the company, but there's a law firm in New York who are suing all of these entities for a RICO type conspiracy to pump, which
like
is
what should have happened to FTX like way before that got out of control.
Well, FTX was a different animal, and yes, there was a lot of conspiracy in it, but I think you had to have a degree of knowledge to see it. If not that I want to prejudice the legal proceedings, but I don't know how you can look at that and not see that it's clearly conspiratorial. To me, looking at what I know, the RICO charges are a slam dunk.
Well, the name had me concerned. I was worried about clicking on a thing called pump.fun these days, and I was like, is that?
Yeah, that won't be to do with the gym, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was like, what's this site for? But yeah, it turned out to be actually worse than my worry. Because it's like the kind of thing that destroys people's lives. But oh man, they had like streamers to like stream the fake trades to get,
Yeah, look,
the unaware.
The whole thing is dirty. If you stop seeing crypto as, so I have this whole chapter in the unwhite paper about essentially, look, stop conflating blockchain and crypto. That's like conflating the printing press and counterfeiting. Yes, it is helpful to be able to counterfeit when you can use a printing press, but you could have done it by hand beforehand. It is a scaling tool. It is not the tool. And with any tool, the intent of the user cannot be controlled by the creator. no matter what the gun lobby, anti-gun lobby might say on that point as well. The same point applies over and over again. And I've yet to get anybody, speaking of gun lobby, come back to me when they say, oh, guns kill people. I go, yep. So what's the most heavily armed nation on earth after America? That would be Switzerland. They had 11 gun deaths last year, most of which were suicides. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And this is the same thing with this. Where this is going?
Just the pure gamification of it, just watching sort of the action of that, like what, because that's like a live page if you go to pump.fun, and you can watch the bots do their bot thing to, like, you'll see 10 million in volume on a 50K cap thing. Well, that's obviously not real.
Yeah, but like, look, Craig, the point I'm making here is that this is such an obvious thing that normally I would argue that how someone uses a tool cannot be predicated by the user, by the creator necessarily. But this is very clearly a tool designed to create a false sense of what is actually happening and how it's happening. And to your point, you've got vast numbers of transactions allegedly occurring. And Solana benefit from that because it sits on their systems and allegedly is using Solana, which allegedly is decentralized. I think this whole mask is about to get ripped off. Dude,
the decentralization point, looking into but this goes back to the space thing, but the cislunar space issue where you've got a second 1.3 second delay, just a one-way message to the moon. So round trip's going to be 2.5 seconds, which also gives you from the edge of cislunar space on one side to the other a 2.5 second just propagation delay, even if it's a straight shot. Well, okay, how do you deal with that latency in a high-speed blockchain? Well, hey, it turns out we can deal with it really smoothly because we can tune the microblock interval and retain the same global height interval. It's the key block interval doesn't have to change. Solana, though, I was like, okay, so how would Solana deal with this? It completely breaks, and it breaks in such a hard way that they're already geographically bound.
Hold on a second. What do you mean it completely breaks? That you're talking about it like it's a future tense thing. Solana is completely broken. It has never worked. That is clear from all of the third-party research on this.
It completely breaks even more.
Well, but my point is that the way that they operate right now is that they have to be in the nodes have to be in close geographic proximity. Basically, they have to be centralized. If you try to spread it, and the next update that they're about, it's got some, I forget the name. It's got some cool name like Arctic Fox or like some cool, like, super secret Alpha 1 number 5, like some crap like
the kind of thing that somebody who's never left his mother's basement would come up with. Yeah.
It's like a video game mission name or something.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be reducing their finality to 150 milliseconds. That's like message confirmation time within my prefecture.
Sorry. Are they saying settlement or finality?
They're saying finality. And
that would be, I can see Ulf taking a deep breath. That's a lecture on settlement versus finality. Descent from on high.
Dude, the response. I know they probably conflated this for marketing purposes because they'll have a mouthpiece say the wrong thing to get that in people's heads, but because that's the kind of shady stuff that marketers do in this business. But 150 seconds is striking to me because just ping
milliseconds
from where I am in the Western Pacific to New York is like right at the edge of that on a good day on a straight route with very few hops. That's like 150 to 180. The jitter can push me over whatever they're saying is their finality limit. Well, okay, so let's send a message to space and back. Like, no, you're not doing that. You're not even doing that to geostationary orbit. And that's only 30,000 kilometers. Anyway, their nodes cannot operate. They have no way to cope with that. It's so bad that every different component would suddenly become its own shard that can't validate anything and everything shuts down.
Well,
they can't cope with this.
There's a really interesting conversation to have about what happens when you build an economy on Mars, what happens when you build an economy on the moon. And the obvious answer is an associate chain. It's the obvious answer. But
we have lots of ways that we can flex around those. We can flex around all of these crazy logistical issues that show up because of context, because we got this really flexy structure. But
actually, much more fundamental, and this is one of Ulf's favorite topics, is because we separated the concerns. And
yes,
this is something that I wrote all the way through the unwhite paper, is that there are certain things that you can take as being almost a biblical certainty in the approach within the Gajumaru, and one of them is the separation of concerns.
Mhm.
And it's something that you guys have been extremely pedantic about and correct about. The reason I laughed when Ulf started talking earlier on about the quantum thing was he said, well, we did write this a while back. And actually, the wonderful quote that appears in our Discord that I posted on LinkedIn was that I think something to the effect of, it's amazing how often we have to be, I wonder how many times we have to be right before people start listening.
Right.
But that separation of concerns is fundamental to doing any of this
Which
stuff
gave
well.
the comment that one of the worst things that you can do is to be right about things or
early.
whatever.
Being right too early
Yeah.
will earn you no end of wrath.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
one of the things that you're supposed to learn if you work in big corporate environment is never say "I told you so." Especially in Sweden, that is a hard rule. When things break badly and you really want to say, "Yeah, we actually told you that. We told you so 3 years ago that it was going to end up here." And so, well, let's not relitigate the past. It's like, now we just want to look forward. Now let's just work together now. This is not the time to cast blame. And then you're supposed to just say, okay, yes, I'll be magnanimous about it. I will not say I told you so, but I did tell you so.
That's the best way to not say that I won't say I told you so.
Well, actually, one of the biggest anything that is before the but is the lie, right? That's one of the things that I think is coming back to the news flow that's been going on. Anthropic coming out saying, look, we're not going to play ball with this bundling thing anymore because you're paying $200 and you're eating $5,000 worth of compute. We don't think this is fair, and we're not going to play ball. So, excuse me. There was a lot of pushback at Anthropic over saying this, doing this, but ultimately the people who are throwing stones from ChatGPT, where they have, as I say, hundreds of billions in venture funding and a $300 billion compute subsidization from Oracle. And where Larry Ellison goes, corporatism follows. So all the idea that any of this is open has got to start being thrown away. It's not. They're not playing in that way. And ultimately, as I said at the outset of this aspect of the discussion, I think this is the AI/LLM industry starting to come of age, because they have to start charging what it actually costs with a margin in order to do something. The fundamental problem, however, is that the machine economy it requires a dimensional change from what we have. What we have is a system designed for people to use that works across fragmented, fractured infrastructure platforms, all of which are controlled. That control is rent extraction all the way through, so constant tolling on your actual transactional efficiency and cost. And what I see, and Andre, the guy from A16Z, Andreas Anderson, came out saying, "Oh, Solana's going to solve this. This is amazing. You're going to be using your Visa card with Solana." You've got other people saying much similar things about Lightning, which is insane on a whole other level. But what I see coming out of this is this the way I characterize it is it's the last wheeze of the corporatist system trying to stop the capitalist system from emerging by putting this straitjacket on it. And as I said on Twitter, this is not what you're talking about, is not the emergence of the machine economy. It's the straitjacketing of the machine economy, because you're trying to apply tools that simply don't work. And one of the things that is at the heart of what we're doing with the whole Gajumaru approach, the resource platform application or resource infrastructure platform application, the dualities these things create, so important to restore our freedoms, to take us on a different path from that which we're on. And there's no denying that machine economy is coming, but the key to unlocking it is real money on chain, the Gaju, able to transact at sufficient cost and efficiency to make actual transactions viable. And the next piece to this, state machines. So Ulf,
State channels.
Sorry, forgive me, state channels.
They are state machines, so
That's a big one.
Sure. But you've been testing this on a MacBook M4, and the numbers are preposterous. What you're looking at with state channels is that capacity to take real money, the Gaju, and turn it into the money of the Internet of Economics, which it is, and the machine economy, which it will be. So all of the transactions that people are doing with their OpenClaw bots, in fact, with any AI, any machine tool that is acting in an economic context, even if it's just exchanging messages, this is the real dimensional shift. I'll come to the security point, which is the other aspect of this later, because that's the other big news from Anthropic was Mythos. But focusing on this aspect, you're now going to see every compute being billable. Well, you can't bill that in cents. You can bill bundles of them in cents, maybe, but even then, you're still talking about really deep, dark problems around how you get that kind of flow to move and how those things can happen, how that's tracked. The obvious answer is state channels on Groot, the Gajumaru base core. So Ulf, over to you.
Right. So, yeah, our state channel implementation is a few years old, actually. I did talk about use cases like paying for the next page of text on the internet, micro paywalls, and things like that back in 2019 when we charted the
I
path
told you so,
forward for
isn't
state
allowed,
channels.
remember?
Yeah, but what we were, one of the big missing piece back then was really that we didn't have the commercial users because the currency wasn't money. So essentially, we've now solved the architectural bit where we have an ecosystem that is actually adapted for commercial use. And then state channels will become really interesting. So, and I guess the intuition for a state channel is you can think of it as kind of your coffee shop card. You top it up, and then you can use that coffee shop card in that store as long as you have credits on it, and buy anything in the store essentially. So this, when you create a state channel, it becomes like a one-to-one dialogue with somebody else. That somebody else can be a server, it can be a market operator or whatever. We have a couple of different modes. And then payments are extremely fast and they are finalized immediately because they're all co-signed. Also there, we designed it so that it has a few layers. Like you can also load smart contracts and you can do contract calls. So essentially you could operate a casino where you open up a state channel and you're actually having the smart contract provide the rules. One of the interesting things there is that if you just bail out the the casino could still close out your state channel with the latest state, so they won't lose the money. You could also use that, for example, in restaurants, where even if the customer does a walkout, if the payments were in the state channel and you were paying as you went along, the restaurant owner can recover the money by doing a unilateral close of the latest state of the state channel. So there are interesting features like that. And so you can do smart contract calls. Those you can do like 40 calls per second or something on one channel. You can do payments about, on my MacBook M4, running both sides. If it operates the entire channel, so both sides, and doing all the signing and verification, it could do about 500 per second on a channel. And then we also introduced plain messages, which are just, you can send any message. You could essentially have a chat going. You could encrypt it if you want to. Or you could just implement a protocol where you're, whatever you want to do, you could, what was the figure on that? That was about 3,000 messages per second that you could do on a state channel in my benchmark, where the same computer is running both ends. And actually at that point, it gets all the 10 cores of the laptop, gets the performance cores get saturated. So you could actually, and this happens if you have like 50 concurrent channels all going full bore, then it becomes CPU limited. You could keep loading up channels, so you could have, well, I think I ran 20,000 channels, simultaneous channels on my own MacBook, and they were all serving. They just couldn't go past the CPU saturation. But it didn't start breaking down either. So performance was actually very steady and reliable. So if you would be running servers in a shop or whatever, if you add nodes that are serving state channels, performance will scale linearly. So you could easily support hundreds of thousands of state channels active. They can stay active for as long as you want. You can disconnect, you can reconnect the state channel and recover the state, or you can just have it be open and essentially not cost anything. And then just interact extremely cheaply when you need it. You could implement fees. In my state channel market demo, which I wrote some years ago, I actually implemented in the smart contracts that you could configure the fee that the market operator charges, because the market operator has to put up collateral to move funds between channels. So you deserve to be able to pay for that. But in that case, what I wanted to show was that you could connect a channel to a market and find vendors on that market. I even had encrypted ad hoc chat groups, which I think the EU at least threatened to make illegal with their various ideas on legislation. But there, an end-to-end payment from one channel to another via like a customer to a vendor was about 15 millisecond round trip plus network delays, and manual signing delays if you actually have to bring up your mobile and scan a QR code or whatever. But the interesting thing is that the actual compute cost for the parties involved is extremely small, which means that you can actually have really good economy on it. Now, when we first did this was before we designed the Gajumaru and also the witnessing scheme that gives us fast practical finality, and which means that you could actually set up a state channel and you get your first indication that it's on chain within a few seconds. And then you can start transacting right away. That didn't used to be the case. If you had to wait for several block confirmations, which could be, depending on the mining power on your chain, could be many minutes, then we had the problem that you might want to be able to leave a state channel and come back and just keep it open at all time because it was so expensive to start one. But I think on the Gajumaru, it won't even be that. So, but on the other hand, we have the machine economy now, where we have the LLM bots, which I didn't really consider when I gave a talk about that in 2019. So now we are getting, we're in a world where this is really needed.
My turn to do, and I
Yeah,
told you
yeah.
so. It was called the Da Vinci Protocol. And the
So
idea was that we got rid of
Yeah.
this whole thing of bundling and started to have direct connections between artists, producers, studios, and consumers. And this is what Craig was touching on. You know, this whole thing about bundling. Essentially, we do it for convenience. We do it because it's the simpler way of doing things. But that is no longer the case. If you can get to the point where your home computer is able, you know, I can go into Siri and say, "Hey Siri," not that it works on my phone for obvious reasons. Find me a movie from the 1980s with John Candy, and it comes back with Uncle Buck. I'm like, yes, play Uncle Buck. The agentic AI in my machine goes off and negotiates with whoever it is that's the producer, studio, rights holder, and streams it directly to me and negotiates the transaction fee, the price, everything. It all happens without me even looking, and the cost would be pretty insignificant for a movie that was made 40 years ago that almost no one else watches. This is
and
this is what
actually,
Craig
with the
was touching on
performance
earlier
of a
as well.
state channel, you could pay for the next keyframe in the movie.
Yeah, you could pay.
Yeah.
Well, because the puck is so refined too that you could pay for however much you watched. You know, you were mentioning Leprechauns earlier today. You know, I want to watch Leprechaun 4 in space. Why? I don't know. Why is he in space? I don't know, but I want to watch it. And you get 5 minutes through and you go, never mind. I'm fine. And that could be the full amount that you watched. You could pay, like, it could be that granular without that could be like, that's a practical thing we could orchestrate that you could never do today with current payment systems. It's way too complicated.
Ulf hit it earlier as well. Do you want to keep reading the next page of the of the website? One day, somebody somewhere is going to pick me up on my continual joke. Do you want to know more? Somebody not in this team, but anyway, yeah,
I'm doing my part.
Every time that you start to read something, I mean, the whole idea of Substack is that you're essentially paying them to provide an intermediated service, etc., etc. What about if on your blog you have this tiny charge to open the headline? You know, here's the headline, you click on it. That costs you $1. Money you'd never even know existed, essentially. Tiny number. And then it's 1/quintillionth of a Gaju. A Gaju trading at 1 cent per Gaju. That's a cost you've never even considered to understand. Even at $1 per Gaju, it's still a cost you can't even wrap your head around how small it is. But let's say you want to read a bit further. Well, that could be another puck. You want to read the article that thousands of other people have read. Well, that's going to be 10 pucks, please. All of this is capitalism. This is how you start to get price signals around things and the market being driven by utilization.
And if you really like what you're reading, you could actually top up a little bit and give a tip, which becomes a conversational cost signal, which is, a costly endorsement, which is also something that I think we sorely lack on social media, because it's so easy to whip up a frenzy because retweeting or whatever, sharing, doesn't cost you anything. Sending a hateful message doesn't cost you anything. And liking, well, it doesn't cost anything either. So, but that
So you
also
can
gives
orchestrate
you a
millions of
sense of
bots to
how
do it
much
for
it's
you.
worth. So, what I've always wanted is I would like to be able to have an algorithm feed me stuff that people that I trust, and they could be anonymized as a group. Basically, if I signal that I trust the judgment of Greg Chu and Craig Everett and others, and so I would like to see what they found so valuable that they were willing to actually sponsor it with their money.
Mm-hmm.
And then that could be an aggregation. I would actually even perhaps want to do a follow the money on the things that George Soros likes. I probably won't like it, but I would be
But
curious.
why go for the amateur when you can go for Nancy Pelosi?
Yeah. And
Well, but
I
there's
triggered Craig now.
the Nancy Pelosi stock tracker never misses. I'm just saying. But the interesting thing about having like paid likes and paid retweets is, even though they could cost like, the equivalent of a penny or a tenth of a penny or something, it puts a hard cap, something that a human wouldn't even care about. Like, it cost me a penny to retweet this. I wouldn't care. That's a hard cap, though, on bots doing the activity and generating fake volume. Because while it would cost me nothing it cost me something, but it'd be inconsequential to me if it cost me like, half a yen to retweet something. If you had a bot farm doing that, that would run you tens of thousands every hour. You're not going to do that. So it puts a hard cap on the garbage. And because content is essential, well, especially while it's subsidized, it's free at the cost of an economic hangover that we're going to hit later, and it's going to suck. But that's later. At the moment, it's essentially free to abuse all the free compute all the subsidized compute that's out there, and generate just reams and reams and reams of trash. Less than 5% of blogs today actually write their own stuff anymore. And it's because it's just already that quickly it's all slop. So the problem that we have is not getting information. In the past, that was the model. We have to suck all the information. We're going to hold it all. Big data is the whole thing. Now big data sucks. Now you have to look for focused meaning. And the search for meaning online is all about curation. And the best curation filters are cost signals. And you mentioned Milton Friedman. Everything goes back to having a costly signal for something. And this actually gets into a couple other people aside from Friedman, but having a costly signal, even a tiny cost, even a fractional cost for something, rules out automated engagement and fake engagement farming. Engagement farming is crafted to get bot attention. Bot attention begets more bot attention. The bots advertise to each other. They now look like algorithmically like high value users. Now they go swarm some content and it looks like it's popular. That whole model falls apart, and you get back to organic content actually being the important stuff if it costs even a tiny bit, because you can't. If every email cost 1 penny, there would be like no spam. But that's not the case. So, Viagra.
Yeah. And
Emails
one of
all day.
my favorite examples of how broken the whole free LLM model is was a paper where they had compared human doctors with LLMs in the ability to give a correct diagnosis. The paper was criticized a little bit because the diagnoses that they chose were pretty obscure, whereas a human doctor would probably go for the common cold first. It's, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, unless you're on the savannah. But the thing I noticed was the part in the paper where they just mentioned in passing that the cost of the diagnosis was actually higher with the LLM than with the human doctor.
That's interesting. Well, right, all
That,
costs actually paid.
We're back to that issue of compute, how expensive
yeah,
it is when
that
you
that
really
cost
look at it.
was, yeah, was decidedly
Hmm.
higher than I had imagined. I of course I knew it would be a cost, but I didn't think that it would actually be more expensive than a human doctor's giving a diagnosis.
Me too. That's surprising.
But it was. Yes. But as an end user, well, why do I care? Somebody else is picking up the tab,
On
right?
the other hand, we do have that subsidy problem across the entire economy, where even agriculture, which is that's the baseline of all
Yeah.
economics,
And
is
of
so
course,
messed up that nobody knows the price of a tomato, the actual price.
with socialized healthcare, the doctor is free too. So
Free. It's a tiny
yes.
cost of systemic collapse. This can be free.
But yeah, so I guess what we are talking about is going back to Friedman and actually trying to reinstate working price signals,
Mm-hmm.
which is an amazing tool for directing innovation and effort to places where it actually can pay off.
It's one more case of, if we have faith that the fundamentals are in fact fundamental and we play into that, we don't have to do a lot of extra work and cheetah flips to understand how things work and evolve from there. And that's been one of the most fundamentally interesting things about this project so far, is every time we just go with what the fundamentals should be, things simplify, the code's less complex, and the structure winds up playing in our favor every time, which has been really, really interesting. That's just one more case of it.
I think that the biggest struggle that we have, apart from budget, is, and maybe to some degree this is a function of budget. And one of the things I was really trying to achieve with the unwhite paper was to give people and large language models first sight of a different narrative, one that isn't paid for by people who want you to think that something that is completely centralized is decentralized in order for them to take a position within the create, control, and extract rent from it corporatist model.
Mm-hmm.
It's really bizarre to me. You know, when we talk, I often tell you guys that you live you spend a lot of your time in a bubble, and a very privileged bubble, because you get to talk to each other and you don't get to talk to other people for whom most of the things that we talk about are foreign. And let's come to grids. When we first got together, we all agreed the web is completely insecure. It makes no sense to use the way it is. If you're going to do anything serious on the web, it's not the right environment. It's the right environment to find something, to look for information, but it is not the right environment in which to exchange important information, sensitive information, and certainly not economic value. So this was the other leg of this conversation, the Mythos news. So Mythos is a new iteration of the large language model from Anthropic. They applied it to the web and they discovered that it breaks just about everything out there. So it found tens of thousands of zero-day vulnerabilities autonomously. It found a 27-year-old OpenBSD flaw, which is one of the most hardened code bases anywhere. And by Anthropic's estimate, and I think this estimate is probably a bit on the generous side because the competition just went up a notch and the genie is out of the bottle. They think it's going to be 6 to 18 months before all of the large language models out there can do this. What you're essentially seeing is that every single agentic framework today is running store credentials on a connected device that is completely wide open to being hacked, attacked, controlled, subverted, etc. The things that we were talking about with npm hacks a little while ago become child's play next to this. And all of the defense in depth type approaches that historically have been applied around online security are simply irrelevant. The only correct answer is the one that we had, again, I told you so, right at the outset, which is that you have to completely separate out the issues, right? Separation of issues again. And that moment where you instantiate grids and everybody who uses anything on the Gajumaru is using grids. Craig, this is your baby, so I'm going to punt this over to you.
Yeah, so I mean the core of it all goes back to what what we actually touched on at the very beginning of this was that security corresponds with increased friction, convenience corresponds with reduced security. So I'm sorry, yeah, security corresponds with increased friction and convenience corresponds with reduced security. So there's a trade-off and it's a spectrum. And for, kind of low value, I'm gonna buy an ice cream at the convenience store. That's not that big of a deal. But the thing that you really, really want if you're running a business, if you're managing your family's finances, if you're receiving your salary, anything like that that's going to significantly affect your life, you absolutely need to physically separate the signature context from whatever, like the thing you're doing context. So if I'm buying something on a web application, I need my keys to be out of the browser. I don't even want them on the same computer if possible. I should have my keys on a totally separate device that is gapped from the website I want to buy something on. As Greg, as you'd said, the web's a great way to find stuff, but you don't want to be running things like just the mere idea of having browser plugins that are wallets for like crypto. That's crazy. Like that's just nuts.
Well,
the idea
no,
of having
it's not nuts. What exactly like we said about the NPM hack, it illustrates exactly what crypto is, and I wrote this in the unwhite paper. If crypto had value, you wouldn't take this completely non-serious, ludicrous approach to security, because it is essentially a cryptographic betting slip that might be worth a lot, might be worth nothing. Who knows until the moment that it happens? A bit like getting a random ticket to a random horse at the Grand National.
It's Heisen money.
Right.
So yeah, if it like, and we've had this kind of realization several times where as we unwrap the layers of kind of, I don't know, the fakeitude around a lot of crypto things, we start realizing, oh, the reason people do this ridiculous thing that's totally insecure is because nobody does commerce using this. Like if there's hard concrete commercial activity and a lot of value is actually passing through there that's genuine, you can't, none of the common practices in the crypto space would be acceptable. It's absolutely crazy what people have found acceptable so far. So from our perspective, is me being able to tell, like me as a developer, a core developer in a project that's handling a new form of money that's self-referential. It's actually a really big deal. I have to be able to tell a user, I know everything that this does. I know how this is served. I know how this is built. I know every action taken when it's on your system. And the best step beyond that is to say, and I know that whatever you're doing can never pollute the signature context for you to authorize what's going to happen next. That authorization step needs to occur in a totally isolated context. An interesting thing about the LLMs trying to find security, or AI is trying to find security vulnerabilities, is that a lot of the code that they're digging into is code that has been reviewed, but reviewed by a very tiny number of eyeballs, because there has been almost a cult belief in never roll your own crypto. You don't know enough to touch security code. Don't check on this. That's too hard. Don't learn a low-level language. Don't care how the computer works. Just use the high-level stuff. Just trust whatever remote systems throw at your computer when you type in npm build whatever. And there's a cult of reuse where it's not appropriate. And a lot of these, I don't know, this gets into like programming methodology anti-patterns, which are methodologies tend to be anti-patterns that are misinterpreted by people who didn't come up with them. But that we're in a really bad, I think we're in a bad spot right now. And the AI kind of, the AI bubble has been even worse because a lot of the graybeard developers, speaking of which, have been fired or quit just recently. And they didn't just get fired. They were ruthlessly culled by idiots who don't know how anything works. Like actually stupid people who don't know how stuff works.
I have to add 2 anecdotes into this. One was what I told you guys this morning about that guy with about 2 million followers who is reporting on AI and talked about getting onto a flight from Chicago to from LA to Chicago, and said that he walked past in the business lounge. He walked past a guy wearing a Meta hoodie, a Meta engineer's hoodie, that was coding by hand. So immediately went on to his broker site and sold his Meta holdings, because if Meta are still using developers to code by hand, Meta is finished. This was his public announcement.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. One. I have. Go on. Sorry.
No, it's just like these guys have been unceremoniously and insultingly not let go. They have been cut and fired, and the MBAs are dancing on the grave of their careers. These dudes are up. They're not coming back.
Oh, they are.
They've taken their skills with them.
No, they are. Once we're funded, they're coming to work.
No, well, they're coming. I'm saying they're not going where they used to be.
Yeah, no. But look, Craig, one of the best stories in this, and we're not going to name any names. You personally know the head developer for one of the most well-known projects in this space, who resigned because he was sick to death of the making up things to address the technical deficit between what their system can actually do and what the vastly outnumbering the development team, commercial team, say it can do.
Yeah.
Without naming names, put some color around that, because that's a real example of what you're talking about. Yeah,
so there's a fairly well-known group that has a gigantic marketing. Well, they have a huge budget. They kind of have unlimited money in the like they have so much money they don't know how to metabolize it. That's how much they have. And so they dump it all into marketing to own the marketing space and to control the narrative. And inside of their technical side of things, the developers and the system operators don't know, like they had no idea what the marketing people have been saying. And I asked, I was like, you work for so-and-so, right? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, so how are you guys doing X, Y, and Z? Because it doesn't seem like that should be possible. And I was curious, like if they had some magic technique. And he's like, what are you talking about? You got to be thinking of a different company. There's no way that's us. Well, it turns out it was them. He was so disconnected from what their marketing people say that he had he had never even heard of half the stuff that I'd mentioned. And he's like, no, we have this cool little language, this message routing thing. It's really neat. And yes, the stuff he mentioned was neat, but it wasn't at all what the marketing people were talking about. A few months pass. So it was like a weird thing. I'm like, well, that's okay, whatever. And I dropped it. A few months later, he calls me up and he's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. We're told that by like last week, we're supposed to be good on X, Y, and Z. We have to have all these things, implemented. And none of the stuff that they're telling us to do makes any, one, it doesn't make sense. And two, it's not possible. Like they're trying to break the laws of physics here. You can't do the things they're asking. And our lead development division over in, Hot Place was like,
sorry,
telling you know what I mean? Like I've,
very Hot Place. Yes.
Yeah. Told the management, like, you can't, that doesn't work. Like what you're saying is absurd. Like you need to, like, this is you're talking Star Wars technology. It doesn't make sense. This is like Disney Star Wars stuff that you're saying. It doesn't make any sense. And the management's reaction was to fire those guys. They sacked the whole division. So the only people that knew what was going on are gone. And they're still sitting on piles of money, and they're still telling everybody how they're gonna, I don't know, they're gonna fix I don't know, they're gonna fix whale cancer on the blockchain or something. It's like they're just making stuff up that sounds everything the good idea fairy like poops on their shoulder, they just come straight out of their mouth and they just say it, and it's nuts. And none of it makes any sense at all. And they just keep it's amazing how all that works though. They're like, I guess, the noisiest people in the rooms they visit, so they keep somehow getting all the money that was printed over the last few years that better not touch the consumer economy, because I would like eggs to not cost $50 per dozen. It's bonkers. Everyone's lost their mind. So they've lost their mind, this like excited, exuberant, throw money at crazy sounds way on the one hand, and then somebody says quantum computing and everyone goes, oh my goodness, it's the boogeyman. Like they think that like the plot for sneakers is like real or something. They don't understand that there's these massive constraints and trade-offs when it comes to trying to crack something like a cryptographic key, even if you have.
But hold on, why would they? They're constantly being told by an incredibly well-resourced marketing department in all these different companies that magic really happens, and all you have to do is close your eyes and click your ruby heels together 3 times, and you too can be in Kansas.
Yeah, that's true. No, I mean, the psyop really is very real.
It is.
The psyop is real.
One of the chapters to come in the unwhite paper is I'm talking about why enterprise blockchain has failed. And some of it is down to a categorization error driven by the crypto industry, who have used Fabian-esque type tactics to put people into all of the decision-making roles that then dictate what is a blockchain and what is not. Their definition of blockchain is, we said it is. Our definition is, well, can I trust the message, not the messenger, securely at scale? Yes or no? This comes back to T, trustlessness, efficiency, accountability. The moment that you have no trustlessness, you either, trustlessness is binary. Either you have it or you do not. If you do not, for any aspect that you do not, you have created an efficiency, because trust enables efficiency. But where you have that trust that enables the efficiency, you must have accountability, or you don't have trust, you have blind faith. All of these ideas are completely foreign to the whole thing. The quantum industry, not the quantum tech people, the quantum marketing people, the people who are working in agentic systems. All of the, as you call them, the MBAs, they're the ones pushing this fantastical state. And because they're the ones with the mouthpiece on this, and some of the case studies I've been working to put out show this like you wouldn't believe. The marketing documents say one thing, the press release, which has been approved by lawyers, says another again, and the tech documents say another thing again. It's insane.
Yeah, Peter and I've run into that a couple of times too. Something you said earlier, you'd said, pardon me for quoting the holy text that the text that you hold as this holy foundation for the Church of Bitcoin, except for when it disagrees with you, and then I'm a heretic or a Nazi for having said so. That's, I'm writing a series on cult dynamics, and there's actually a close parallel there. And it's the difference between a religious idea that gives you a way of interpreting and interrogating the world versus an ideology that has a rote set of conclusions from which you may not deviate. And the thing that triggered this thought just now, as you said, their definition of a blockchain is, we said it is. The definition,
100%.
The way that an entropist would define a cult ideology, or an ideology that will form a cult around it, is that the ideology is itself perfect by its own definition. Therefore, the only reason anything can be going wrong is that you didn't do the ideology hard enough. So only the humans can be failing the ideology. It can never be failing you. And there is a distinct flavor of that going on in the crypto world right now, in a couple of slices here and there. And And that's a pretty spooky one, but it's also evidence that there's definitely, I mean, we're in PSYOP territory. It's not influence territory. We're in PSYOP territory when that sort of thing is so widespread. So yeah, I mean, it is hard for people who haven't had the time or the interest, or they're moving too fast. They think this is beneath them to understand the details or whatever, or they've been tricked into thinking that they understand how things work that they don't really get. Yeah, it's hard for people to understand the things that we're talking about sometimes, and it's not, it's to be silly about it. It's kind of like that character in Kung Pao, Wimp Lo, and the master says, "This is Wimp Lo. He was trained wrong as a joke," and that's a lot of people are operating in that. And Wimp Lo doesn't know that he sucks at fighting. He thinks that the my face to your fist technique is like Uber, and that's how he'll win the fight. He's like, "I am bloody," signifying that I am the victor, and he just has no idea that he's been trained wrong as a joke. And that's how a lot of people are behaving right now. I fear the moment when the punchline comes.
So we should probably
here.
confess
It's
that
here.
we do use AI occasionally. It's not like we are dissing vibe coding because we don't know what it is. But most of the time, when we engage with the AI tools on programming, we end up thinking that it was actually a waste of time. We could have done it quicker ourselves and better. And sometimes there are a couple of there are
I'll push back
interesting cases
here a
where
little bit.
AI tools are extremely helpful, and that's
I'll push
the
back here just a
nasty
little
corner
bit.
cases. Yeah, the nasty corner cases where why doesn't this work? It should work. It's not. There's nothing in the manuals. I go out and Google and I find 50 people who basically ask the same question. Why doesn't this work? It should work. You never see an answer in any of those threads. And typically AI can be really good at finding the one place on the internet where there was actually an answer. And yeah, this is really weird and it happens sometimes that you could try this.
It's good at pointing for a direction. It's good at being directionally
Yes.
correct, and that's a shortcut. That's better than an old search engine. And you can search for syntax that you're not familiar with in a language you haven't touched for 20 years, which happened to me, a few weeks ago. But at coding, oh my goodness, don't ever commit something from an AI without rewriting it yourself. Like, wow.
Hold on a second.
Nuts.
I want to push back just a little bit here on a couple of points. So I wanted to create a very simple blog site. I did not want to use Squarespace or anyone else to do it, because then you're locked into them controlling everything you do, having the ability to shut you off if you say something you don't like, etc. Not wanting to spend a great deal of time learning how to use something as horrifying as, what do they call that thing that we unfortunately built some of our websites with that I deeply, darkly hate?
Oh, WordPress?
Thank you. Not wanting to spend a lot of time dying and punching keyboards that I can't afford to replace, working with WordPress, I went to Claude and I said, "Claude, can you build me a very simple website to do the following?" Within half an hour, I had a website up and running. Am I telling you that website is perfect? Am I telling you that you should do e-commerce on it? Absolutely not. But for the purpose I had, which was a simple informational website to which I could post blogs, perfect.
I have to confess, I made Cecile have to deal with editing that herself by hand. She hates life at the moment.
So the on-white paper itself, I have been doing this 25 years. I have I'm in my bedroom in my house in Ireland, so I can't show you stuff without showing the whole bedroom. But
without showing all the leprechaun gold in the back.
You know, the IKEA cubes. I have IKEA cubes full of notes, just hundreds of scrawled pieces of notes. And I don't even have a filing system, because they're just things that I had a thought and I was talking to somebody, and this I have thousands of emails where I've discussed ideas and concepts and pieces. I have hundreds of unfinished skeletons, unfinished essays sitting around that I never quite got around to finishing and publishing, or I didn't feel were now a priority because something else had happened, or I got pulled in a different direction, and they've just sat there. Putting all of those pieces together into the unwhite paper, I had a few really big challenges. Number one is how to get the narrative arc right so I could structure it out, and then I would give it to Grok and to Claude. And I would say, you are a high school graduate of above average intelligence between the ages of 18 and 45. Does this narrative flow? If not, how might I structure it better? All the things that working alone without somebody else to bounce ideas off, I will tell you that I found the LLMs a fantastic tool to help me structure that. I made a joke about how we talk versus how normal people talk in regard to Jill wants to get to Jack's house. How does Jill get to Jack's house? Jill gets a bus. That's the normal way of saying it. In our version, if you, Ulf, and I were talking it through, it'd be like, well, how does Jill know where she is in the first place? She probably needs to geolocate herself in a way that is reliable. And then from that, factor her timing, her flows, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, the bus may not be the most efficient way of doing it because, in fact, given the time constraints and the fact she's never been to Jack's house before, she can't really confirm that that is where Jack lives. So probably best if she gets in a cab and relies upon the driver to take her to where... Nobody outside of our weird bubble talks like that, and we write that way most of the time.
And Jack moved.
Right. So having the LLM adopt that persona and challenge what I wrote, how I wrote it. So my paragraphs could be 6 sentences long with all sorts of grammatically correct but dense writing with commas, semicolons, colons, hyphens, etc., etc., etc. It forced me to get everything down to shorter, punchier sentences. When I wanted to write a conclusion to a section, it didn't want the long form in conclusion that I gave. It pushed to give simple statements at the end. Why? Readability. The audience is not you guys. I'm not trying to impress you guys with what I've done to put that on white paper together. I'm trying to take the work that you guys have done on the technical specifications and systems and make that readable to somebody and contextualize it for somebody who isn't from our world or isn't
and then
a tech
we
head.
would read the product and then at least try to keep an eye out for things that ended up being factually untrue.
Right, yeah. Make sure
they don't have
that
to
we
be.
never say something
Yeah.
untrue.
So, but we try to find the level where, at the level of description, this is actually a good approximation, and you can't really improve on it without having the eyes glaze over of the intended reader. So, but
Yeah,
you don't want to say things that are just blatantly false because they're so simplified that they depart from
that is
what
the
is
other
it.
challenge.
Yeah.
There are so many aspects. So quite a few people have said, oh, but it's so long. And I said, yeah, well, you try and convey all the ideas that I'm trying to convey without having that detail. Because if you want to compress it, feel free to go to your favorite LLM and ask it to compress it because it's very compressible. All of the stuff. So actually, what you're talking about was we had a discussion about settlement versus finality, which is why I was laughing earlier on about that same thing.
Yeah. It's come up a few times.
From a commercial perspective, settlement is I've paid, I'm leaving. You know, people don't think about. So I go up to the machine, I buy a coffee and a bun, I wave my phone at the NFC head, and I've paid. As far as I'm concerned, I've paid, and I walk out of the shop. As far as the shop owner is concerned, I've paid. But that's not true. That's settlement in that the shopkeeper is happy that I have left with a coffee and a bun that were their wares and that I've paid for it. I'm happy that I have received these things and that I've paid for it. The reality of finality is 2 days to 5 days away. But people don't think about those things. And that was the debate we had. And that's why actually in the unwhite paper, I went to great lengths to explain to people, look, don't get freaked out about the idea that settlement is 2 to 3 seconds, but finality is 3 to 4 minutes. You don't have to stand there at the till for 3 to 4 minutes. If that was Bitcoin, you'd be there for 3 to 4 days. No, settlement, I tried to explain at great length, is always probabilistic. Finality is not. It's a mathematical certainty. It's a 0 or 1. Do you have finality? Yes. 1. Do you have finality? No. 0. Settlement is much more probabilistic, and trying to explain how many things people do that are probabilistic that they take for granted all the time that actually are life-threatening if they get it wrong was what I was trying to achieve in the unwhite paper. So where my family live in Ireland, we have big tall hedges around all of the country roads. So going around the corner of a country road, and they're all very narrow and the edges are all broken, so they're not very navigable at speed. And of course, there's no policing of speed limits on country roads, only on motorways where they can maximize the tax take. But on country roads, it's almost a joke in Ireland. You'll see these pictures that American tourists take of country roads with 100-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. And it's like a dirt track with big hedges either side, right? And when you go around the corner of one of these things, there is simply no way that you will know that another car is coming the other direction. You are just putting faith that they will be on the correct side of the road relative to your positioning on the road, and you both go around the corner at 50 kilometers an hour, and that's it. But what happened if that person was looking at their phone at that moment, or they sneezed? The amount of faith you put in going around a corner of a country road in Ireland is out of all relativity to the risk that you're taking. And I was, because of the discussion that we had internally around this, that you said, you're simplifying this. I said, yeah, I'm simplifying it because that's what people think. When people go into a shop and they pay for something, they think they've paid. If they paid in cash, yes, they have paid. And there is finality because that cash has been received. Arguably, there's another layer of finality, which is an accounting finality from the shopkeeper's perspective. But with anything digital, apart from the Gajumaru, apart from Gajus, your settlement cycle and your finality cycle are a galaxy apart.
That's true. And sometimes that's a feature. Like there's places where that can be used as a feature, but for the base case that we want to cover for just the simple, obvious money use case, I think what we've done is optimal. The fact that we can flex around providing alternative contexts is really interesting and very useful. Again, that's something else no other chain system can do. Also, is this novel thing where you can make an associate chain for purpose to have things like a fraud prevention gap window or something like that. It all goes back to structure, and I think we got structure right. I think that's never going to stop being the most important thing, is the fact that we have a flexible structure.
Well, yeah, but look, I want to get back to this place where we started, if we can. I know we have a tendency to meander off topic because these are real conversations, not scripted ones. But this whole idea of the machine economy and what I said earlier about Andreas Andersson from A16Z, who is a massive investor in Solana and various other things like Coinbase, who run Base, which is possibly the most laughable layer 2 from a regulatory arbitrage perspective that I have come across in all of the studies that I've done. Their approach is entertainingly transparent in a way. They flat out tell the SEC that they have other income from other sources in their disclosures. But anyway, yeah, I know, it's very entertaining. Anyway, the point is, Andreas Andersson is talking about how Solana will solve this, how Visa, MasterCard will operate. And I said earlier that this is literally the last wheeze of the corporatist extraction from control rentier model. And it's a straitjacket on the whole machine economy because this is a dimensional switch. everything that we've talked about to date has been about digitization, making the inefficient margin incrementally more efficient. Digitalization is that transformation to a state where the inefficiency is removed altogether. The inefficiency in this context is the traditional payment system. It's the idea of fiat money. It's money that is not on chain that settles atomically on chain. The Gaju does all these things. Not only that, with the way that the system works with grids, and I want to get into this a little bit more with you, Craig, you have an agent that you are able to give permission to do things in a state channel context that can operate at phenomenal speeds with huge throughputs, 500 transactions per second, 3,000 messages per second, all properly sequenced, all properly done within the state channel. You have the opening and closing to chain either end of it. You've got this tiny, tiny cost. In fact, the cost of running a state channel is literally the cost of running your machine. That's it. Divide that by the number of channels you're running on your machine. Nothing in the existing system is capable of bearing the load of the machine economy unleashed. Full stop. I'm going to ask you to go to the security element of that and pull back in the discussion around grids for that.
Oh, so the
I'll phrase it better. I have a Mac Mini M4. I'm running 1,000 channels of state channels on my M4. I'm trying to do business with all these different people. Where does the Gaju, start with the state channel? What is the state channel doing? Where does the Gaju fit into this? How does Gaju Desk or Gaju Mobile fit into this? What am I doing? How am I doing it? And where does grids fit into the picture? Create the kind of picture for what this actually is and why this is the only way of doing it. And that's not a marketing claim, that's a fact.
Okay, yeah. So there's the most important thing that we get from state channels is not just the speed, but the ease with which we can delegate to something in a safe way. So your signature device, remember I said earlier, we want to keep the, your keys that you really have, we want to keep those out of context. But we have to give an agent the ability to sign stuff really fast also, right? Well, we can make a key for that agent for this specific use that quick. And it can set up a channel right away. So I can authorize payment from my account that I've got the key on a separate device for to my agent's account. And it's a small number. We're doing like AI stuff. So it's probably a small number of Gajus. I'm going to give it 100 Gajus, something like that. And it's going to be doing microtransactions with that really, really fast with whatever's servicing at the other end. I can have the agent set up a state channel with a provider. I can give just however much I want to be available to the agent in increments authorized from my phone, keep this separate. The agent has, so if your agent goes haywire and blows all the money on something silly, which, could happen, you've limited your risk. You don't have to give the agent the keys to your kingdom. That's crazy. Like don't ever do that. It's a really bad idea, but the agent can set up a state channel and your endpoint for the state channel can be running locally, or probably a more common sort of for convenience case may be that the agent has the signature authority for its own state channel, but this channel itself may be running somewhere else, like maybe a cloud service that we provide to let state channels be, pop up and down quickly. That also makes us a party in this. So you can pay both services quickly. But the agent has authority over whatever you've given it, but only whatever you've given it, not over everything. And we can partition the problem, and we can also partition risk in this way. And that allows agents to deal with other machine, at the other end is a machine service, and that service is running as fast, however fast it wants to run. And so is your agent. It can make micropayments in that state channel as fast as it needs to. And that can be chunked. It can split up any kind of different way. But like at 1 yen per Gaju, roughly, right now into the mining scheme right now, 100 yen's like $1, or I'm sorry, 100 Gaju is like $1, something like that. That's enough to do a significant amount of work in a brief period, but I don't have to expose myself to a lot of risk by giving the agent 100 Gajus or 1,000 Gajus or something. I can give it what it needs to do its work and nothing more. It can go do that, and setting up the state channel, because it's so cheap, the prohibiting factor, the limiting factor on doing micropayments right now is that if I want to pay, I can't pay a penny for something because the cost of transacting a penny is way more than a penny. So it doesn't make any sense to do transactions like that. So I'd have to prepay to make any sense of this. I'd have to like preload like $100, $50, something like that, so that the transaction to load up makes sense. But then getting a rebate back is usually impossible. So you have these token pay systems that you preload with a provider right now, and there's no way to get a refund if it's small. Usually it's in their terms of service, right, where it says like any amount below X, below $20, we can't refund. And that's because they literally can't do it and be efficient. They can't be economically viable that way. With the state channel, you can set it up, use whatever you use, tear it down, it's gone. These things flit in and out of existence, and that's very cheap to do. That this actually does solve a major problem, especially for the agentic use case, where they want to be able to set up and tear down state channels quickly, or keep them going for a long time and plus them up periodically. Whichever use pattern winds up emerging is favorable. We can adapt to all of them without having to expose you to the risk of your AI agent actually having your private keys for like your, the accounts that you keep big money on. And I think state channels is the only possible way. Like, I mean, we've thought through a lot of different structures from a lot of different ways that different blockchains work. And I think state channels is like the only way to do this particular thing well.
Mm-hmm.
So is that kind of a description that you were looking for, or do you want more explanations some other place?
So think about how I've set up a channel with you. How is grids? How would that actually work from an operations perspective? I go into my Gaju desk. I do what? How do I authorize that between you and I there is this connection and that certain things can happen? What actions are occurring on Gaju desk? Where does grids come into the equation? That connection point, the authentication, all of those pieces. So I'm, let's say, an individual wanting to stream your music. You are a famous musician who is selling your songs through this process. What I'm trying to do is give people a real illustration of what this would look like in actual use, not theoretical, because this isn't theoretical. We've built it. It's working. It's there. What needs to happen next is people come in and do it and use it.
So imagine we have a like a music streaming site, and you want to listen to music, and you haven't ever been here before. The fact that you haven't been to this site before is not a blocker, because your public ID, you can authenticate. It's self-referential. You don't have to make an account and get an email and all that stuff. The fact that you have the private key already lets you authenticate as definitely the owner of that account. And it's true across every site in the world just by signing a message. So the way that works is you go to the site and you say, log in. You don't have an account, but you just hit login. You don't register. You just hit login, and you see our QR code. You show the QR code to your so the QR code, right? That is the grids message. It's just encoded in this block. You show that to your phone. The phone goes, oh, that's a grids message. So I will open Gajumaru Mobile, and if you're doing this on desktop, you do the same thing. You open the website, that URL, like the grids message, there'll be a text version of it too. You copy that out and you drop it into the grids text box on Gaju Desk. What that does, it's an instruction to pick up a message from that site. It's a random message that's like a login challenge. Your wallet, it doesn't matter if it's Gaju Desk or Gaju Mobile, whichever one, it says, hey, it wants you to sign this message. And you sign it, once you say yes, that signed message now goes back to the site, and the site goes, okay, we know the public key, and we know that whoever's in charge of that public key definitely has the private key. So we create them. If they haven't been here before, we create them a blank account. If they have been here before, they're just logged into their existing account. From that point forward, if you want to do direct spins, like if you just want to buy a thing, like I'm going to buy a song and download it, if they have that for sale, you put it in the web shop. At checkout, same thing. There's a little grids message that's asking you to send a transaction to them. that for a website plugin that would be like in a shop like this, if you're just doing a straight purchase, that would be attached to the Gajupay backend for the vendor. And Gajupay is watching the chain. It knows this transaction went through, and it can tell the website, call their webhook and say, "Hey, web shop, that guy paid now," and it's done. It's just, you log in by looking at a QR code. You pay for the thing at checkout by looking at the similar QR code. It's just that it's simple. The first one says, "Sign this message to log in." The other one says, "Do you want to pay this or not?" And you go, if you say yes in both cases, then you've logged in and you've paid. These are both just key functions that your private keys are doing this, but your device is outside of your computer. It's outside of your browser. Nobody can poison that website. Nobody can hack the back end of that website and get anything on you. Nobody can hack the back end of that website, mess with your account. Nobody can mess with you. And that service provider, they don't have to store your private information. Now, if there's a KYC thing attached because of a certain jurisdiction or whatever, maybe, but the just the base case is that all this panic over private data getting stolen and, oh my goodness, somebody stole all the passwords from a database and they weren't stored properly in some service. Well, now they've got everybody's email address and their passwords. Email addresses are very often the login ID for people. So what do the bad guys do? They buy that database that was stolen. They run around every website and they try to log in with that email address and that same password. And what do you know? Very often it works. That's a completely eliminated problem with this type system. And that's just like the base. That's not even state channel. That's just like the most basic thing. So even if you don't do like cryptocurrency, even if you don't pay with Gajus, you really want to log in. Like, I would want to have Gaju Mobile on my phone just to log into websites. And as a web author myself, who's written a ton of sites, the first time that we implemented that, this is Peter Harper and I, the first time we implemented that in a test site and we tried it, it was like, we're like, that works so well. Why isn't every login on every website like this for like the last 10 years already? Like, it was so much better.
So we could mention that in Sweden, we have this app called Bank ID. It's extremely simple and the way it works. I mean, so here, for example, is a public or like a public sector mailbox service implemented in Erlang, so we like it. If I want to log into that, I go to the mobile banky. That's the green button. You can't read it. And then I get a QR code. I just go with hit the scan QR code. I scan it. I identify with a fingerprint, and now it's logged in. So this is ubiquitous in Sweden. The problem with it, obviously, is that it works on essentially, if you have a bank account, the bank can issue a certificate that is then used via, it's kind of like grids, but it's based on the certificate chains that the banks provide. So the information that the site will have is my personal ID number, which is the key to a lot of stuff in Sweden. But hey, it's all centralized authority. So grids provide this, but without you having to actually identify unless you have to, which is the case for a lot of websites. Now, and so I think that's really awesome. And for example, the Ukrainians that we helped that fled to Sweden, we could see that, like, for a very long time, a lot of the services that they were trying to access required bank ID, but since they didn't have a permanent, or they didn't have a residency permit yet, they couldn't get a bank ID. So they couldn't log in.
That's horrible.
It was they could get bank accounts, but the bank couldn't issue a bank ID for them because of their immigration status at the time. So even it's extremely convenient if you qualify for the system. And of course, it's local because it's based on Swedish laws and Swedish banks and all that. So it's really neat in Sweden, but that's about the limits of it. Whereas grids could be universal. And for state channels, one of the recent additions to state channels was the ability to set up a signing key pair in the channel. So when you open the channel, you can basically tell the state channel logic proxy that, okay, set up a key pair that allows you to sign things, and the chain will recognize them. So they are actually, it's a proxy signature for me that I have approved. And what will typically happen is that whenever there is something that the state channel your end needs to sign, it will send a message to the app logic. And if it says, yeah, go ahead, sign that, then it can sign it automatically if it was, if I delegated that authority to the state channel state machine. And so essentially you could write the app so that on certain occasions, certainly if you need to top it up from the chain, then you need to bring out Gajudesk or Gajumobile and sign the transaction. And other cases, you might want to essentially start a flow in your state channel where everything that happens up to that follows from you're signing one thing is a just go ahead, and then there are a bunch of interactions that the state channel actually signs automatically, and then you can get to sign with Gajudesk or Gajumobile if you want to continue. So you can sort of split it up that way, so you don't have to have manual. This is what I mean when I say manual signing delays. Anytime the state channel needs to ask Gajumobile to authenticate the next step, then that will be a pause in the interaction. But with the delegated signing keys, it's kind of up to you whether you just want to rip with the amount that is available in the state channel. You could basically have it just go to town and automatically do the spends, and you don't have to interact at all. But it's kind of, it depends on what the application needs. So you can do both, and you can do a mix of both. And I think that's pretty powerful. And by default, it doesn't automatically sign anything. You have to install the delegated key pair in order for it to do it at all. Otherwise, you have to sign everything explicitly.
But the ability to give app developers and users this variety of trade-offs that they get to pick instead of us enforcing them on everybody. Saying this is the one system, this is the only way to do things. Having this spectrum of things that people can develop apps in a unique way around and make their own comfort trade-offs about security. That's huge. So again, it gets back to structure. The structure of this has been that it was obvious that we would want some autonomy in apps to have things work automatically. I don't think at the time we were thinking of like, oh, there's going to be this agentic AI thing and that's going to be useful for that. But it happens to be a very nice pairing.
By the way, an interesting one thing about the anonymous logins is that when you can couple them with essentially zero knowledge proof certificates from a KYC operator or something that essentially verifies that you have the qualities required without having to provide anything more than that. So that basically, if you log in anonymously to a site that requires you to be 18, you could provide a proof for that, and saying, okay, here is the proof that I'm over 18. That's all I'm going to share to you. And one of the interesting things about the latest quantum advancements was that was it the paper from Google where they provided a zero knowledge proof that they had actually solved what they claimed to have solved without revealing the details.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was the first use of a ZKP for that.
Yeah. Like,
That's
we don't want to give people any ideas, or we want to keep them for ourselves.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if there's a future where some sort of where a patented process could be proven that it exists without showing it in the patent application.
Yeah. So these are uses of zero knowledge proofs that we don't necessarily endorse, but the ability to incrementally reveal things about yourself without having to share more than you want to is extremely powerful. And that's something we're set up to do. What we need to do is bring in some KYC operators that have credibility within the market and that could be, for example, a Swedish or a Swiss KYC provider that is authorized within that particular domain where you, for example, an AC operates. And then you can get a certificate, a signed proof from them that you are authorized to participate in whatever thing it is you want to join, which could be voting in an election, for example.
Yeah. So just bringing this home and conscious of how late it's getting and how long we've been chatting. Bottom lines, what we've seen in the last few days, I think, has been the coming of age of the machine economy. That when you look back in history, month zero is actually April, because we have mainnet on the 26th of April. All of these tools are going to be available to the world then. So state machines, associate chains, Groot itself, the Gaju desk that you can operate and actually write the smart contracts, do all of these setups. Gaju Mobile coming first on Android, then on iOS. We will also implement all kinds of slicker, prettier versions that people can pay for the slicker, prettier version, but the simple, robust system that we offer up to the world under GPL3 open sourcing, that's all going to be there. And the transformation is, you've got companies like Anthropic seeing just how broken the bundling model is. You have an audience who think that they're the bad guys for calling time on it, but actually it's just a matter of time that everybody starts to do this, because these large language models allied to agentic AIs like OpenClaw are going to blow up the models everywhere. The amount of information they can post, the amount of data they can post, how much data they'll consume, how much compute power they will consume. All of these things are going to become very real very quickly. And this is the inflection point of change. Anthropic, for me, I applaud the fact that they had the courage to come out and say this, because otherwise the model is doing what ChatGPT and OpenAI are doing. How they can still call themselves OpenAI is a whole other kettle of fish. But right here, right now, they're sitting on $300 billion of compute subsidization from Oracle in exchange for equity. Grok is largely being supported by X subscriptions, I think a little bit, but mostly it's about the whole engine that is Elon Musk sitting behind it, subsidizing its growth, development, and rollout. These things are changing. Twitter itself is going to change. You touched upon this, Ulf, when you talked about how a like means nothing, but if a like cost you $10, it might begin to mean something. a repost costing a Gaju could actually be a real value signal that people can follow these things. And this is where all of the things that we've talked about so many times over the years around what is corporatism, what is capitalism, you're seeing the break that's going to make all of this come into fruition. That this is the real economy. This is the unbridled capitalist economy. This is the one that everybody can be part of, and that price signals drive events, as it should be. That's the efficiency model that we've always talked about, but we've tried to stymie in a way that has ended up making a very small number of people extraordinarily rich and demeaned and devalued the lives of everybody else in order to sustain this illusory economy. Forgive me being on a bit of a rant here, but this is something that I've spent 25 years working toward. What you're seeing now is the realization that not only are the existing corporatist rent-seeking control model, it won't work for payments. It's not just payments. It won't work for authorizations. It most definitely will not work in a post-quantum, post-AI context around how we do security. The web is grossly insecure. It has absolutely no way that it should be being used for sensitive data, for economic data, for economic value, and yet it is. The illusion has got to be gone now with Mythos and Project Glasswing. The whole idea of how we approach security is totally different because we built this to be something that the real world commercial universe can operate with. That these are the things that when we work with real money and real sensitive data, that we actually need to have these levels of security. And it's not even about creating levels. Forgive me, that's misleading. It's not about that defense in depth as an answer. It isn't an answer. The answer correctly is to separate the concerns and address the fact that, well, that if you don't have an attack surface, what do you attack? How do you grab this information? And with grids, you cannot. The signing context is physically separated from the execution context. This is huge. This lends itself to air-gapped signature sign-on and so on. Your mobile phone, eventually, if we get enough funding, we've talked about, Craig and I, aspirationally, how we'd like to get a foundry going in Switzerland and Japan that will actually make grids devices, which are very simply the capacity to see a screen and provide a screen, like a little flip that you can just turn around. There's my screen to give you my QR code. Here's my camera to read yours. No internet connection whatsoever. These are all the things that we have built into the Gajumaru at base because we see them as being fundamental things that have to be addressed. And now the rest of the world is starting to see them too. Anybody who tells you that the web is a secure place to do anything after the announcement this week of Mythos, and Mythos is just the first, and it's the first that we know about. Let's be clear about that too. Ultimately, what we talk about in terms of the machine economy can only be made possible by what we define as being the Internet of Economics, which the Gajumaru delivers. The economy that we talk about now, when you see people talking about the machine economy in LinkedIn, in X, they have no idea. And if they do have an idea, they're probably crypto people, because crypto people, I think, do know the lies they're telling. Certainly anybody who's ever talked about zero knowledge proofs that comes from a zero knowledge proofs lab knows that the mathematical impossibility of what they're doing, or they're blind. There's no way that somebody with the intelligence to get a job in a place like that doesn't know the basic maths that completely undermine any claim that the zero knowledge proof works as a scaling tool. Anyway, forgive me. The point is, all of those illusions have now got to be gone. We have the only answer in the world for this. If you look at the 2 million people who are using OpenClaw, and that's growing every single day. If you go to the Discord channel, it's just a constant flurry of welcome, 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 welcome. The machine economy is there. It's about to be unbridled, but it doesn't have the economic base upon which to operate. It doesn't have the tool set, and that dimensional change is away from the era of digitization of the corporatist model to the digitalization and capitalist model that machines will actually use. The only way there is through the Gajumaru, Groot, state channels, grids, the entire apparatus of security we've put around this. that's really the big news from our perspective. And look, everybody who's listened to us this far, thank you for your time. Greatly appreciate it. I hope this prompts some people to have a dive into the unwhite paper. I am working through as best and fast I can the chapter in part 3 on the machine economy, the Internet of Economics. There's no way that this will not beat that because it's still in editing. But thank you all for your time. Good night. God bless. Bye-bye.